for some reason, we have this false sense that if I ask for help, I am less than. Mm-hmm. Even though that's way harder than just suffering in silence. Like, if you just suffer in silence, you don't have to change anything. That's easy. You're telling me I don't have to change? Sign me up. But when you actually communicate, I have a problem, that takes a ton of strength.
It does. All right, so today we're here with Jamie Fisher. And Jamie, I'm going to just call you a local. And I can call you local because you're from Nicollet.
Yeah, 3 years local.
So where's Nicollet?
Nicollet is right in between New Ulm, St. Peter, and Mankato. It's kind of like if you do a Y, it's right at where the Y connects.
Okay. Do you at least have a Casey's or a Quick Trip there?
No.
Okay.
Not even
We
that.
just got like a Dollar General probably a couple years ago.
All right.
But
Okay.
when I lived there, it was underneath 1,000 people. I think now the sign says 1,013.
Wow. This is almost the size of St. Bonnie.
Yeah, I always
Which is
win
still a
the
dinky
smallest
town.
school competition because I graduated with 27 kids in the class.
Yeah.
That's all
And
right.
my wife is from Waconia, and she kept on going, yeah, we had small class sizes. I was like, oh, challenge accepted. What was your class size? And it was, I don't know, somewhere in the 50s, 60s, whatever it was.
Wow.
I'm like, oh, 27.
Yeah.
You win. So Kate,
Yeah.
was Heather in?
Yeah, so, well, I made the connection, like, when you guys started attending Freshwater, and Zach was like, oh, like, I met this guy, Jamie, at the gym, and then came to church, and whatever, and he was talking about your fiance, and she's from Waconia, and then I saw you guys come into church, I'm like, I know her. Why do I know her? So, yeah, and I had her dad for driver's ed teacher for a computer class in high school, and then we were both in marching band for a year, so that's pretty cool how things come full circle. So
Yeah, I never knew marching band was cool until I got to Waconia, where that apparently, my wife keeps telling me, well, the king and queen of homecoming were in marching band. I'm like, oh, so it's legit.
it's a different, show
That would
choir
fall into
and-
your category.
Yeah,
Like,
show
I
choir
had no
and
idea
marching
that
band.
there was show choir and marching band. And
Yeah, my
I was on
husband
the
didn't
other
either.
side of the school. There was the jocks and there were the musicians, and then there were the rest of us that were out smoking cigarettes by the shop classes.
Yep.
Is there
That's
a,
where
is
my
there a
area
term for
was.
that? Not jocks, not just.
No, well,
No?
I think we're called burnouts or
Oh,
whatever
my.
else.
That is the old
I'm-
school term for
I'm
it.
the old
thinking
school
of the
term.
outsiders.
In other words, we had
Yeah.
burned out before we even started, so I don't understand that.
Oh
but
man.
That's all right. So we're talking with Jamie, and today is really a great topic and so timely because we're talking about mental health issues and how they're tied to substance issues. And Jamie really is an expert on this, as he got his master's degree in counseling and psychology from St. Mary's University in Minnesota, and has learned EMDR, which he's going to explain because a lot of people have no idea. EMDR means the same as ABCD and EFG, and cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as acceptance and commitment therapy. And I think just one of the cool things that you really like to speak on is that when our behaviors align with our values, then we feel connected with ourselves and others. So this is a wide array, and if you have a notepad near you, like I do, make sure if you're listening to this, obviously you're driving, don't do this, but if you have a notepad, you might want to take some notes. We'll certainly link anything that we talk about will be linked in this podcast underneath it, so you can find all your information. You can find Read Behavioral Health online. We'll certainly give directions to that as well.
And I think too, the whole point behind this is this podcast is bringing life into those situations, kind of getting rid of the stigma around it, and really as Christians, like, what is a biblical response to the learned functionality of addiction? So if you can speak on that, we're happy to have you here.
Yeah. One thing I've learned in the profession is loved ones of addicts don't know how to actually have conversations around it because no one ever wants to be a trigger, right? And everyone experiences triggers, cravings. Anytime I drive past Culver's, I immediately think, I want a concrete mixer or a butter
Oh
burger.
yeah.
So the trigger there is Culver's. The craving was for concrete mixer or Butterburger. Or I just saw they have a cheese curd burger now too. So
I saw that too.
yeah, there's
Now
going
I'm
to be a
triggered.
stop soon. But everyone feels like they're walking on eggshells. The person that's receiving the treatment, the family members, no one actually knows how to have conversations around it.
Right.
Because I used to run the family program at Reed Behavioral Health too, which was just a free family thing for anyone that's in the program. We meet one Monday a night, and I always love to do open discussion on it because almost everyone asked, can I even talk about this with my family members or friends? Because I don't want to air out my loved ones' laundry, but at the same time, I don't know how to actually talk about it. Mm-hmm. And one thing that loved ones constantly think of when they think of addiction is, why are they choosing the addiction over their family? Or why are they choosing the addiction over me? And in reality, it's not that simple. Because in all my time, I've met one person that just said, I have no idea why I became addicted. I think I just woke up one day and wanted to be that way. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I make a point to ask all my clients, so did you ever wake up one morning and just thought, I want to be addicted today? And everyone but the one person says no.
Right.
Most of them chose the substance in order to help them with their anxiety, help them with their grief, help them with trauma, help them with social situations. Because coming off COVID, most people forgot how to socialize, actually.
That was a weird phenomena.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. And now people are generally more agitated than they were 4 years ago.
Exactly. And so one of my favorite quotes is from Gabor Mate. And his quote is, don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain.
Getting to the root of it.
Because most people form the addiction to help them function in some sort of way.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's a form of self-medication to some way, shape, or form. They're
Exactly.
medicating to dull the pain, magnify the pleasure, erase a memory.
I think, too, something to remember is we all have coping skills, right? When I get stressed, a lot of times I go into listening to an audiobook, and Zach will be like, oh, so you're just checking out right now, and it's true. And it's something that I go to, and I have to be like, oh, maybe I don't need to have that noise. Maybe I need to.
Yeah. And so when we ask an addict, why are you choosing this over your family? We're really asking, why are you choosing your main coping skill? And asking someone to get rid of their main coping skill.
Right.
Like if someone asked me to get rid of exercise, I can honestly say I don't know how I'd function. Because exercise is one main thing that I use to clear my mind of everything. It helps me be in the here and now.
Right.
But we live in a society where everyone always feels like I'm not enough. Or even if we do a good job, the critic comes out and goes, well, you could have done more. We never actually focus on what do we need. It's more about what should we do. What should is normally based off of someone else's expectations of you that you're trying to live up to in some sort of way.
So with exercise, you can be addicted to exercise.
For sure.
Right?
Yep.
At what point does it become an unhealthy addiction? That's one of those things where do you draw the line? How can you tell if listeners aren't even evaluating their own coping skills, and at what point is this getting out of hand, kind of a thing?
Yeah. And that is a great question because it normally comes down to, is it helping you function or is it hurting your function now? One of the criteria for a substance use disorder, according to the DSM, which is just a diagnostic manual for mental health and substance use, one question is, did your substance use cause you to miss out on major obligations at work, school, or home? Have you tried to cut down and you just haven't been able to? Are you having intense cravings? Are you using more than you actually want to? All of that gets down to the function of, is this helping you function in your life the way you want it to anymore? Or is it bringing you away from your life? Completely detaching you.
Yeah, that's a good thing to think through, for sure.
Yeah, addiction is we don't deal with things, or we deal with them wrong. People go back to what I call, and I got this from someone, I don't know who, it's your familiar friend. And alcohol can be a familiar friend, pot, weed, whatever your choice is, meth, it's a familiar friend. Because it's always there, you know how it's going to make you feel, and people go to it. It's psychologically, it's like going to your best friend, and you have the same hit every time. So, I have a question for you dealing with parents, because we have a lot of parents who have addicted kids. And now drugs are easier to get than ever. Kids are dealing with anxiety at skyrocketing levels, in part due to social media, comparison, isolation. I mean, there's a whole host of things that we don't even understand yet when it comes to the ramifications of COVID. But a parent, as a pastor, I'll just speak as a pastor, most parents have no idea about their kids' drug use. And if they do, they're like, not my kid. They are very wise. They would never do meth. And then to come to find out, these kids have been doing meth, selling coke. Like, it's crazy what they're doing. And I will share that my daughter had an addiction problem, and she ended up going to treatment for a year. And so we knew she had problems when we put her in a treatment program, a year-long treatment program called Hope Harbor, which is just a fantastic Christ-centered ministry program. But when we put her there because we could no longer keep her safe from herself. And then, because the relationship deteriorated, so that we could hardly even talk to her. We were horrible parents. She told us that all the time. I mean, explicits, it was awful. Going home was not a safe place. We'd cry before we pulled in the driveway because of the volatility. But she's doing great now. But I'm just to say that. But it was awful. And once she started sharing what she had done. I mean, the amount of drugs that she had done was far greater than we ever would have expected. So what can you say to a parent now who knows, like, they maybe caught their kid with a pot pipe? Or, but now pot, it's like, it's no big deal. It's the new aspirin. What would you say with a parent who's like, look, and I know that my kid is using, would you say this is probably a bigger issue than what you think? Or would you say, just love them, throw it away, and pretend it didn't exist?
Well, pretending it didn't exist creates more shame around the problem. It's kind of like the boogeyman, where we just try throwing in the corner, and if we don't see it, it's not actually real. But it just grows from there. So what I would say in this situation is shame doesn't work.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
My mom shamed me my whole life. Not to lay blame on her, but she did.
Yeah, and unfortunately, humans are learning beings. So if you raise someone in a family where communication is normal and actually recommended, like if you raise your child in a family where you're able to talk about pretty much anything, they're going to be more likely to be able to talk to you later on as well. It's kind of like if you bring your child to church, they're more likely to become closer to God because they're seeing you live it out. Just like you guys talk about living a Christian life, kids pick up on that. And so with having this conversation, it's more about trying to understand the why behind it all rather than trying to punish them for their substance use. Like, what's driving this right now? Why do you feel like you're unable to talk to me about this? I'd say go into the conversation with more curiosity than punishment attitude.
So what are some other questions that you could ask? Let's just hypothetically say a parent has a daughter, just is now emotionally distant from the family. Parents don't know why. but she's just shut off. Parents' reaction typically is to get more in her face and threaten to take things away if they don't say something to her, which in turn causes the girl to push more away. You can put a boy there in that situation, whatever, any teen. So what advice would you give them?
Well, one thing kids always want to hear, no matter what, from their parents is, I'm always going to be there for you. I'm always going to love you no matter what. And in this situation, there's a great craft model. I forget what the acronym is, the whole thing behind it, but it's community reinforce something. But what they talk about in that is letting the person always know that you're going to be there and that you're ready to talk when they are. Because forcing the conversation actually drives people further away. Because then defensiveness comes out and resentments come to the surface. And when people are in defensive mode, it's kind of like a fight, flight, or freeze mode in a way. They're trying to survive in that conversation. And so letting someone know that you're always going to be there, always going to love them, and you're ready to talk when they are is a huge, huge impact on someone's life.
So I'm going to say something right here. Parents, when they can't get their kids to speak, will often push one of their kids' buttons to get a reaction.
Yep. Just like the kid will push the parent's button to get a reaction as well.
And from what you're saying, and I'm deducting this here, is that clearly goes in the exact opposite direction of where you want it to go.
Because no one's actually having the conversation to solve anything. Instead, it's having conversations to hurt someone as well. Because whenever we're defensive, it's normally because we're pushing on some form of shame. And so when our defenses come up, we try to hit back as hard as we can to make sure no one goes into this area.
What does it mean to push against some area of shame?
Yeah, so shame is something that no one ever wants to talk about. And the only thing to drive back shame is vulnerability.
So give an example.
So a huge shame-inducing thing is just substance use in general, right? Or feeling like we're not enough is a normal narrative that a lot of people feel. And so if you come at me and going, why are you using the substance right now? You have everything going in your life and you're ruining it. I'm probably not going to feel safe to have a conversation with you right now.
Because I just shamed you.
Yep. I'm probably going to go, well, you're the reason my life is falling apart. You're a terrible parent, and if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be needing this substance. So now I just hurt at a core value of yours of being a parent. And most parents, when they find their child has a substance use, have a voice inside their head of, could I be the reason?
Yeah.
So I just hit at something that you feel shameful of. Are you going to be open to a conversation when I hit at your shame to actually come together in this situation? Or are you going to get even more angry and lash out again? We just got into a boxing match.
Right.
And that doesn't solve anything. So, yeah. Yeah, there's some stats out there. So what percentage, I'm sure you know all the numbers of people are struggling with substance abuse, addiction. How many people get help?
Yeah. So I like to look at SAMHSA, the website for that, which is a government-driven website. It stands for Substance Abuse, Mental Health. There's an S and an A in there.
So many acronyms.
That I'm spacing on.
I hear you. I'm a
Psychology
teacher,
is all acronyms. Like cognitive behavioral therapy is CBT. EMDR is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is a fancy way of saying we're going to use both sides of your brain.
I do want to talk about EMDR.
Yeah.
It's huge right now. And there's more things coming from it, like brain spotting. There's also art, which is not art drawing or anything like that. It's accelerated resolution therapy, which is normally a precursor to a lot of different modalities as well, to help get someone in an area in which their window of tolerance widens, which just means they're able to go deeper in that situation and not be triggered or dissociate in a lot of these situations. I just lost, so stats.
Oh, yeah. That's all
So I believe from 2018, the stat was 8.9 million Americans report having a co-occurring disorder, which is substance use and mental health. But only around 7% actually receive treatment for it.
That's staggering. That's not very.
Well, treatment's expensive.
Yep.
It's our insurance companies.
Yep.
And if you don't have insurance, most of the homeless crisis, this is my opinion here, a lot of the homeless crisis is simply mental health issues that have been left unchecked, and this is what you end up with.
Well, that's why a lot of
Because you
veterans
either go in the criminal system or you end up homeless living under a bridge.
That's why a lot of veterans come out to be homeless as well, that have significant trauma. And a lot of veterans turn to substances in order to take away a lot of that trauma.
I deal with a lot of veterans.
The only problem with using substance use to treat a mental health condition is all it does is press pause.
Right.
The moment you're no longer using that substance, everything comes back. It's kind of like compound interest, because you're not actually working through anything, you're avoiding everything.
Yeah. So we know that one of the things we need to do is get rid of the stigma around it. Like you said, the boogeyman in the corner, make those conversations more approachable and not so taboo.
Right.
To ask for help,
Right.
to find resources. How does the Bible influence you in your profession, making that biblical connection? How can Christians bring life in this situation? How does faith play a role in recovering from addiction?
Yeah. Faith is huge because it's something bigger than you. Like, humans like to believe that everything is caused by them, right? Like, if you're having a bad day, it's because I didn't say the right thing. So we like to come back to ourselves, where faith is a way to take you out of the center and actually give you clarity. Because when you're in the middle of the storm, you're just trying to survive. You're not actually seeing the full picture. You're just trying to map your path out of the storm from what you can see right in front of your feet. But when you're outside of the storm, you're actually able to see how big it is and what's the path of least resistance. It's kind of like if one of your friends comes to you about a relationship thing, you're able to see their relationship more clearly than they are and give probably better advice than they do. Just like they're able to see your relationship more clearly than you can because you're in the middle of it. And the feedback loop in our mind normally says, you're what's wrong. We are bigger critics of ourselves than cheerleaders. We normally look for areas in which we didn't measure up rather than successes that we've had.
Those are the things that replay in our minds.
The shaming. We self-shame a lot. Women self-shame way more than men do.
My mom always
Just
told
to
me, she's
point
like,
that out, but it's true.
Yeah, she's like, you're your own worst critic. Like you look great, or you sang well, or whatever, and you'll beat yourself up. You'll have that ongoing thing in your head. So
I like to use faith in the way of, it's not just me, right? Like, there's plenty of verses in the Bible where God just talks about, lay all of your concerns on me. Cast all of your anxieties on me, and I'll help you.
Yeah.
Isaiah 41:10 talks about, he will raise you up with his righteous right hand when you lean on him. And so when we take the blame off of ourselves for everything that happens in the world, the load is less, the shame is less.
I think there's this aspect too of your identity comes into play where I'm an alcoholic. Like you let your addiction be your identity, define you. I'm an alcoholic. I'm, addicted to drugs, whatever it is. And when you know that you're a child of God, you know that God loves you, that he's paid for you to live a life of freedom. I think that makes so much of a difference to actually enable you and empower you to, oh wow, there's something different, that God has had a purpose for me, and my identity isn't in my addiction. So then I think some of that shame is able to be taken away. And you're able to turn away and know that it's possible not to be a slave to that, whatever that addiction is. And the Bible talks about over and over about God has created us so that we can have a renewing of our minds.
We are a new creation in Christ. The old is gone, the new has come.
Yep. And so that's something, even for me, when, as far as like mental things go, you can relearn behaviors, right? Or create new behaviors, new patterns to replace the addictive behavior.
Yeah, and it takes being intentional with your actions.
Because you're creating new neural associations.
Exactly.
And those are very hard to create, and they take a long time. And the older you get, the longer it takes. If you've been raised in a family that shamed, guilt, you were never good enough, those are things that are so entrenched in your mind. And once you understand when Jesus says that you are a new creation in Christ, you really have to change your entire mindset, your entire pattern, and it is incredibly difficult to do. Because addiction is easy. It's easier to just self-medicate or whatever else and not worry about it. And you just kick the ball down the field. I mean, you have to deal with it because wherever you go, there you are. And you can't get away from yourself. So, yeah, it's a huge thing. So what would you say to someone who's stuck in the cycle of addiction? They're not going to call it. I mean, most people, let's face it, who are in addiction don't have these fancy words that we're trying to use. And they just know, like, look, every day I get up, I got to drink 5 shots. And by the afternoon, I have a couple more. And at night, I have 2 dozen. Or I smoke weed. Whatever. It doesn't matter what the addiction. They haven't broke the cycle. How would you say to that person? Because I know someone's going to be listening that knows they're convicted right now. They're like, this is my cycle. How do they break that cycle?
Well, one thing I would say is the pain doesn't have to be eternal. You don't always have to be in pain. And it's not a sign of weakness saying that you don't have everything put together.
Right.
I can't name one person in my life, other than my wife, I'll say that, that has everything put together, right? So that's what being human is. But for some reason, we have this false sense that if I ask for help, I am less than. Even though that's way harder than just suffering in silence. Like if you just suffer in silence, you don't have to change anything. That's easy. You're telling me I don't have to change? Sign me up. But when you actually communicate, I have a problem, that takes a ton of strength.
It does.
I ask all my clients, what was harder? Suffering in silence or actually admitting that you need help? And all of them said admitting I need help just because it took them so long. A lot of them realize they have a problem with substances, but don't actually seek any help. And if I don't talk about it, then it's not really a problem.
Right.
The moment I actually give voice to it, it's concrete in that it is actually a problem. Where if I don't say anything, I can deny it all I want. I can avoid that.
Right. Well, I can tell you when I have depression. And when I finally went to the doctor for it, I literally remember that day when I stood in front of my mirror at the house feeling awful, just like in a dark hole. Nothing's good. And it's not, I have a great, beautiful, wonderful wife, decent kids. Church is going well. And I just felt like I was in this I couldn't get out of a hole. It was, and And a rut is nothing more than a coffin with no ends. And so I was in a rut, and I said, what would you, and I literally said it out loud, what would you tell someone if they came to you in your position? I'd say, well, are you eating right? Are you getting enough exercise? Are you getting enough rest? Do you have some good relationships, and have you gone to see a doctor? And I checked off 4 of those, and I hadn't gone to see a doctor. And so I made up a reason to go see the doctor because my finger hurt. It actually did kind of hurt, but not enough to go see a doctor. But I went and saw a doctor, and they checked on my finger, and which was really nothing. But I needed a reason to go in.
Yeah.
And I shared with them why. And they gave me a prescription for Prozac, and it helped me a lot. My chemistry, like in Minnesota, I need sunshine.
Yep.
And it wasn't external, it's something inside of me. And so now I say the same thing. Hey, have you gone to see your doctor? Are you eating right, sleeping, getting rest, talking about it? And I can honestly say I did this, but it was pride. And that's because I'm a man. I'm a pastor of a church. I preach hope on a regular basis. And when you're trying to preach hope and you feel like you're in the bottom of a dark hole, it's miserable. And so I finally was honest enough and told my wife I was going to do it. I mean, she knew I wasn't doing well, and so did some of my friends, but that was hard. It was that line to cross, and now I talk about it because it's helped me so much.
Yeah, and I think, too, what you just said is you told your wife, and telling someone holds you accountable, too, to get help. You have somebody checking in on you, and I think that's so important.
Yeah. But I have a question for you, Pastor John. Have you noticed that pride has done anything positive for you? Or helped you in some sort of way?
Probably not. I think it's given me confidence once in a while because of some things I've done right. You're proud that you do something right, so you're more eager to do it again. But other pride usually gets in the way of decision making, because if you rest on your past, the past is yesterday, and the only easy day is yesterday. And pride will keep you from taking chances. It'll keep you from seizing opportunities. If
you're worried about failing,
Yeah, if you're worried about failing. And for me, it was worried about being judged. And I honestly, I was. Some people at church, how can you struggle with depression? You're a pastor. Don't you just pray about it? I'm like, yeah, I pray about it. Duh. It's like, of course I do. But they assume, you don't pray. The Lord would heal you if you're spiritual enough. And I had to get over that and say, you know what, they can pound sand. I really don't care. I believe that God uses all things to heal us. And he certainly used that
You read
for me.
the Psalms. Read Job. I mean, there's definitely, we were kind of talking about this in the worship podcast a little bit. The Psalms are really a great place to see how God, how people have talked with God, and there's lamenting. Yeah. There's crying out to God in your despair. The psalm always ends with giving praise to God and recognizing God for who.
Misery.
Yes, exactly. And I think sometimes we think, church is just so happy. All the songs are happy and joy, but really we see a model of sorrow and coming to God with our sorrows,
So Jamie, circle back to that. You asked me a question. Has pride ever helped you? Why did you ask that question?
Because I've noticed that in my profession, pride has gotten in the way of a lot of progress. Because admitting that we don't have all the answers is literally giving up your pride in some sort of ways. Right. And so, whether it's in couples relationship, admitting that you have a problem, I too suffer from depression. And one thing, I would say I had some pretty bad depression around when I was working a full-time job and doing an internship for mental health. And it got to the point where I didn't really see a way out. But at the same time, I wasn't going to church for probably about 4 or 5 years by that point, which I went to church every Sunday, growing up all the way through high school, college. But when I moved to the cities, my excuse was, I just don't find one I connect with. And so my wife pointed that out. She was like, you don't go to church at all. And so then we started attending here because she was like, I heard some nice things about this one. Do you want to try this one Sunday? And I was like, yeah, let's try it. Came, and this feeling just came over me, right? Like all of a sudden, some of my anxiety and depression was lifted off of me. I also started exercising literally every day, even though it was hard to fit in my schedule, working a full-time job and having to do 30 hours a week in mental health substance use. So I started waking up at 6 a.m. in order to go to the gym. And that was hard. I've never actually thought I'd wake up before 7 before I had kids. That was a real struggle.
Now you'll be prepared.
Yeah, I mean, that's also, I saw Pastor Zach there quite a bit in his sweatshirt, headphones on, saying, don't come near me.
He's a little, he's a little quiet in the morning.
At the gym, I actually started striking up conversations with Zach because I had questions about the Bible just like everyone, right?
Right.
Like, how did Catholics have one Bible, Lutherans have one Bible, and then there's the NIV, there's the King James? Like, how does that happen if everything's God's word, right? And through asking questions with Pastor Zach as we're lifting there, I can honestly say we probably spent more time in conversation than actually lifting, because I was on a strict schedule as well. So he didn't get in the way of some of my muscle building, but through asking questions, I was able to gain a deeper understanding. And also, I came to the acceptance of I'm never going to have all the answers. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't even say I have all the answers with mental health, substance use, all of that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But what it did do is it made me realize that I was missing a pretty big part of myself. Like, when we talk about identity, we're more than just one thing. Mm-hmm. Like, if you need to say, hey, I'm an addict, in order to take ownership of it, do it. But at the same time, just because you're an addict, and also when you hear, I still have people in my life that love me, Jesus still loves me, I'm accepted, that's a powerful thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You're accepting me for all of my shame that I just admitted to.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And you didn't turn away.
Yep.
That's pretty huge.
It's powerful.
So let me change the subject here a little bit. And I talked about EMDR. This is the third time I'm bringing it up.
Yep.
But it's the right time now.
Mm-hmm.
EMDR, I am vaguely familiar with it. I know there's different types of EMDR. I would love you to unpack it a little bit and let us know who would benefit from EMDR.
Yeah. So EMDR goes by, there's a huge thing in EMDR of your brain will repair up to its max capacity. And how I like to think of it is trauma is memories that are stored in the incorrect area. So if you look at it, I like to picture a filing cabinet where that file is placed in the wrong area of your mind. And what EMDR does is it does bilateral stimulation, whether it's through, like if you see someone do this, the eye movement, it's having your eyes go. When you're sleeping, and you try this with a partner one time, it'll be creepy, but just try it. Look at them when they're in deep sleep, and you'll see their eyes moving back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen that.
The thought of that is your brain is just processing everything that happened that day and storing it in its proper location. So what EMDR does is bilateral stimulation to help the memory get stored correctly. Now, I will say that through EMDR, your brain's going to be processing even more than just in that session alone. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not unheard of to have dreams about what you just processed that night. I can say when I did the training, I had dreams about it too. And there's some people have like literally pictures going through their brain as they're doing it. Some people just have thoughts that go and don't picture it. Everyone responds differently.
Wait, so it's like exercises you do, or do you get hooked up to something?
No. Yeah, you can explain that.
Yeah.
There's different types of EMDR.
I'm trying to like
Yep.
picture.
Yeah, so it all hinges on bilateral stimulation. So you can either
both sides,
tap.
working both sides of the
Yep.
brain. So people do different.
Yep.
So you can,
exercises.
so
Okay.
again, you tap
So
on
there's-
your chest.
Okay.
Like they like to call it the butterfly
So
tap.
cross your arms.
Yep.
So those are just listening. Cross your arms and tap on your chest, just below your, right above your shoulder blades or on your shoulder blades.
Yeah, and
Not
there's
shoulder blades. What are those called? Whatever. Up
Collarbones?
front. Collarbones.
Collarbones.
Tap on your collarbones.
or clavicles for the
Clavicle?
technical term.
Clavicles. Yeah. And then the other one is on the hands, right?
So
When
there's
you-
buzzers as well that you can do as well. So you hold on to these paddles and they'll just alternate which one buzz as you're going through it. There's also the eye movement, follow the finger.
Okay.
And there's different speeds as well, which the faster you go, the more it works through. Where if you go slow, it sinks in.
What about the tapping on the hand thing?
That's just another way of doing it as well. It
So,
it
like-
kind of comes down to what the
I had
client
it
is
done
most
once
comfortable
by
with.
someone, and they had me held. I don't know how I held my hand. I can't remember. And they just tapped on it with their thumbs.
Oh. Pressure,
Yep.
kind of pressure.
Yep.
Well, not pressure. Just it was just a rhythmic tapping back and forth, back and forth.
They were pretending they were playing a video game, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I was so focused on what they were doing, I didn't actually think about what should be happening in my brain.
Yeah, and that's where I wouldn't say try doing EMDR alone. Having some guidance there is also pretty beneficial.
Well, that was with someone.
Yeah. So that's where it's all. I ask my client initially before even doing anything what they feel most comfortable with. Whether it's the eye movement, whether it's buzzers, whether it's tapping the hands or the butterfly. It doesn't really matter as long as you're doing bilateral stimulation.
So
Working
from one
both sides
side
of the
your
brain.
body to the other, moving stuff from left brain to right brain, right
Exactly.
brain to left brain.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is fascinating. And I know so little about the human brain. We just don't. We don't know how things. We just don't know how it works very well. But learning these things is awesome. People dealing with concussions, people dealing with past trauma, how it gets you to, especially EMDR, to calm down and to be present in the moment, because a lot of people with past trauma live in that moment every moment of the day. So I just had a conversation with a military colonel related to moral injury, which is a whole nother subject that we are not going to cover here. But moral injury is a huge thing for military people and causes trauma, which in turn soldiers cope with it because of a moral injury they sustained. But that's a whole nother subject. We're not going to hammer on that.
But the whole point of getting at the root of the issue too.
The root of the problem.
Yeah.
right?
So before you go, could you give us any resources that you think would be beneficial for listeners who are either they either have a loved one who's going through this and they need advice on how to approach them, or maybe they're listening and they're like, man, maybe I have an unhealthy addiction and maybe I need to seek help, you know? What resources could you provide, and what's kind of a takeaway in all of this?
Yeah. So what I would probably recommend there is whether it's going to one of the pastors here to have a conversation, or there's also meetings for family called Al-Anon. There's a lot of self-help groups in the area, such as Smart Recovery, which is a more science-based. There's AA, which is 12 steps.
And Celebrate Recovery that meets
Celebrate.
at the Waconia
Yep.
campus at 6:30 on Fridays.
Fridays, yep.
You can also schedule a consultation with a therapist as well to just have open conversations. But really, the takeaway is we need to talk more. We need to have more open lines of communication. And we need to practice vulnerability. Because Brene Brown is a huge researcher on shame and vulnerability. And she likes to say shame grows in the darkness. And the only way to shed light on that darkness is through vulnerability, which comes from active communication and listening to support rather than listening to solve. Because when we listen to solve, you maybe catch 75% of the information that's actually being shared. Because you listen just long enough to have a response.
Right.
Where if you listen to support, you're fully present. You're going to have responses because more likely than not, it's going to be a loved one talking to you. And you're going to want to be invested in this. But we don't practice listening to support very often.
Right.
Yeah. Those are some good words. Well, thank you so much, Jamie, for being in the studio today. I think our listeners got a lot of just practical advice from your experience and the wisdom you have in that area. Any last words, John?
Yeah, no, we'll send people to your website and give them all the links in the columns here, but it's always good to talk to you. And I love learning. I love listening and finding out more information because this is something that's near and dear to my heart. It's been in my family. I've had to deal with it myself. And I work with a lot of people right now. I mean, if everyone knew how many of us actually have issues related to mental health, substance abuse, it blows you away. And we just don't ask questions. But, we live in a world, especially post-COVID, that really is just like things are growing like crazy, and it's challenging. But we need to be there for the next generation and for our generation just to help them to navigate these difficult times. So thanks for being on this field. It means a lot.
Yep.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
All right. Thank you, Jamie.